Glenn Litbait is an incredibly socially awkward idiot who thought being a doctor meant saving lives and not getting seduced by every monster girl with a heartbeat. But here he is, the only guy in town who can heal these ladies. And let's just say their medical checkups get freaky real fast. This anime is saucy, and I'm going to be censoring a lot of things. Glenn is not lucky, but Glenn has luck. Bro didn't need a sword or a shiny armor to bond with the finest maidens, but ladies line up at his feet literally begging for his vanilla milkshake. And to be them massaged by his magical staff, I'm not going to tell you why, you're just going to find out.
Doctor?
Story time. There was once a war between humans and monsters, probably because humans felt inferior to these monsters, or they wanted full power over them. The war ended when everyone got tired. His first patient is a cowgirl, and wow, she is stacked like a tower of watermelons. This blunt goat gets right to work, checking those watermelons like they hold the secrets of the universe. This checkup is sending her straight into bliss. He pokes, prods, and then checks her ears. Turns out she's with child. Her husband, a full-blown bull with horns, was happy he's about to be a daddy. Glenn's assistant, Saffin Teed, slithers in holding flowers to congratulate the happy couple. But there's a problem. She is in a mood, and it's not the good kind. She hates that Glenn was alone in a room with another woman, especially when he has to lay hands on them all in the name of a medical examination. She also wants him to call her by a cute nickname from their school days, but that's not happening. A letter arrives from Dr. Dully, summoning Glenn and Saffin for a checkup session. They head to the arena the next day, where they're greeted by Tessalia, a centaur princess and a fighter. She struts in, all royal and confident. The Rizless farm animal in a human body gets to work straight up, and this time his first patient is a catgirl who wants to pounce on him so badly that she jumps on him immediately. But Saffin is having none of it. With one quick tail whip, the catgirl is off Glenn and sent flying. Then Tessalia steps up for her checkup. She starts undressing, talking about how she doesn't want a rigid man, but someone as soft and gentle as Glenn. This fool is too dense to realize she's flirting. Saffin, once again, is not having it. She jumps into the conversation before this horse girl can seduce the world's dumbest doctor. Later that night, Glenn is tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Tessalia's attendants, Kay and Lorna, had spilt some concerning tea. These two centaur ladies are loaded with watermelons so majestic, I won't mind having one of them. They are worried because Tessalia has been losing fights lately, even though she trains hard and has talent. Glenn, with his two remaining brain cells, starts thinking about possible reasons. Saffin shows up and offers to bring him alcohol to help him relax. When she returns, she hands him a single glass while she herself chugs a jug, like she's the drunken kung fu master. This snake lady is built differently. Tipsy and feeling bold, she wraps Glenn up in her tail. It looks like she's about to drain the humanity out of him, but instead, she just threatens him. Apparently, Dr. Cthulhu would never forgive her if she loved this goat into oblivion. The next day, Tessalia loses another fight. That night, while she's training, she gets ambushed. Not by an enemy, but by Glenn and some helpers who tie her down for a hoof treatment. She resists, but there is no escape. Once again, Glenn the vet gets to work, filing and fixing her hooves while she cries out loud. Saffin sees what's happening and isn't about to let Tessalia moan her way into Glenn's pants. Without hesitation, she wraps her tail around the horse girl and shoves the tail end into her mouth. The next day, Tessalia enters her match and wins effortlessly. She cheers like a kid who just got a lifetime supply of candy. Turns out, all she needed was some proper hoof care. Who knew a horse girl needed functioning feet to fight? Saffin remembers the time she was dragged to Glenn's house like an unwanted package during the war between monsters and humans. Once the war ended, she was sent home. As she left in a carriage, Glenn turned into a weeping mess, bawling like a baby who dropped his ice cream. Back in the present, Saffin realizes they have run out of purified water, but before she can do anything about it, a knock interrupts her. She opens the door, and there stands Glenn asking about her sunblock ointment. Later, the two sit in a boat, floating down the waterways. Glenn starts blabbering about the importance of sunblock, making Saffin thank him. Meanwhile, Saffin is just excited to be outside with him. The person paddling their boat ditches them, and Glenn reminds Saffin that they are here for purified water, not a shopping spree. Suddenly, a goofy-looking merman pops out of the water and greets them. Saffin, being Saffin, immediately gets excited and tells the merman to take them to the gift shop. Glenn, as a fun sponge that he is, immediately shuts that down and tells the merman to take them to the purified water shop instead. After finally getting the water, Saffin once again tries to head to the gift shop. Glenn looks at her like she just suggested setting their money on fire and tells her they'll waste cash. At the gift shop, Safin gets excited over a single glass, but then she says the best gift is following Glenn on his journey. This makes Glenn blush because even he can't believe she actually thinks he's worth following. A little mermaid suddenly calls them, making Safin practically explode with excitement. She insists they stop and listen. The little mermaid, Lula, introduces herself and says she sings for 3 Coopers. As Safin and Lula chat, Glenn completely zones out. This absolute genius is too busy thinking about nothing until Safin wakes him up by licking his face. Lula convinces them that listening to her song will make their relationship lovely. Safin tries to pay, but Glenn says he'll handle it. Lula starts singing beautifully until she starts coughing like a grandpa without his inhaler. She tries to continue for free, but Glenn, suddenly remembering he's supposed to be a doctor, says they need to find out what's wrong. He asks the weird-looking merman to take them somewhere quiet for an examination. Lula, broke as a joke, says she can't afford an exam. Glenn assures her it's free. He checks her mouth, finds some inflammation, and then he asks her to open her chest. Lula, rightfully horrified, refuses. Safin quickly steps in before Glenn can make things even worse and helps him rephrase. Glenn then checks Lula's gills and, like a professional, sticks his wet fingers inside. Lula makes some weirdly happy noises, making Glenn freeze like a deer in headlights. Finally, he pulls his hand out and finds something sticky. Before Glenn can explain what's wrong, chaos erupts as a boy falls into the river. His mom screams for help. Lula immediately jumps in and saves him, proving she's already a better hero than Glenn will ever be. But while everyone fusses over the boy, Lula suddenly goes limp and slides back into the water. Glenn finally remembers that Lula can't switch between her lungs and gills. He takes a deep breath and dives in, scaring Safin half to death. She yells at the merman to take her closer. Meanwhile, Glenn catches up to Lula underwater. He kisses her to give her air. Lula starts breathing, but Glenn immediately starts drowning. Just as Lula is about to panic, Safin's tail appears in the water. She grabs both of them and hauls them back. When she sees Glenn clinging to Lula, she instantly yanks them apart and scolds him for being reckless. She also tells him to consider her feelings before doing anything stupid. Later, Glenn and Safin watch Lula perform at the mermaid concert. Afterward, she swims over and they ask about her health. She gets shy remembering Glenn's terrible attempt at being useful. Safin scolds Glenn again, and he actually apologizes. Lula thanks him instead. Glenn smiles at her. This makes Lula so embarrassed that she swims away. Safin, still completely done with Glenn, tells him she wants them to get along because she considers Lula her little sister. Back at their clinic, Glenn and Safin treat a slime lady and talk about how they will help her keep her shape. She leaves while being carried out in a bathtub. Meanwhile, Glenn and Safin finally get a break, so Safin removes the sign that says they're available for treatment. Just when they think they'll have some peace, a knock on the door ruins everything. When they open it, they are shocked to see the council representative of Lindworm City, Lady Scotty Dragonfell, off bandits who thought they could mess with her. But instead of running, those idiots, Glenn asks what Scotty wants. She replies, but he hears absolutely nothing. Before his brain cell can process what's happening, another woman barges in and translates. Turns out, she's Kunai, Scotty's bodyguard, and she's here to yell at them for not listening properly. Safin whispers to Glenn that Kunai is crazy devoted to her master, but before she can finish, Kunai shuts her up. She then explains that she lost her arm fighting Asti the fight, and now she needs Glenn to find her missing arm and fix her up. Glenn asks why they came to him. Kunai says, Doctor, Cthulhu referred them, which should have been Glenn's first red flag. He then asks what kind of monster she is, but before Kunai can answer, Scotty explains that Kunai was originally human, but got stitched together using parts from dead people. Before leaving, Scotty orders Glenn to treat Kunai, but Kunai instantly refuses, saying she can find her own arm and reattach it herself. She dips, leaving Glenn standing there like a fool. Safin and Glenn start talking about how aggressive Kunai is, but Glenn, with all the confidence of someone who has never been useful, claims that the doctor who experimented on her just had bad technique. Then he decides to go looking for Kunai's missing arm, leaving Safin and the fairies in charge of the clinic. Meanwhile, Kunai spots one of the bandits who attacked her and chases him into an alley. But before she realizes what's happening, someone ambushes her, and she ends up on the ground. Back in the city, Glenn starts looking for Kunai's arm, but then realizes he never asked where she even fought the bandits. Suddenly he hears a scream and finds Tilia, who was just shopping for vegetables when she Kunai's leg. Glenn picks it up and assures her that this is not a crime scene. Meanwhile, Kunai, now dragging herself across the ground, realizing both her arm and leg like a complete amateur. She suddenly feels a weird sensation. Her thigh is shaking. Turns out Glenn is holding her leg like a total creep. Tilia watches him work and says she's falling for him, but then she immediately adds that he looks like a perv with the way he's fondling the zombie leg. Glenn realizes he's been caught being weird and begs her not to tell Safin, or he's doomed. Kunai, still on the ground, figures out that Glenn is the one touching her leg, and she starts wondering when her curse will finally give her a break, because she can hear the voices of all the dead people who make up her body. While Glenn holds Kunai's leg, Lula appears and tells him there's a rumor going around that he's collecting body parts for some creepy experiment. Glenn, looking guilty as hell, quickly explains that he's just trying to help his patient. Lula says she knows that, and then casually pulls out Kunai's missing arm. Glenn is shocked, thanks her, and cleans the arm without realizing Kunai can feel everything he's doing. He tells Lula he needs to find Kunai next, and she tells him to just ask her arm and leg where she went. That evening, Glenn finally finds Kunai and starts stitching her back together while talking to her. Kunai starts calming down. After fixing her arm, Glenn moves onto her leg, making her make some very interesting noises. Meanwhile, Safin gets a visitor, her drinking buddy. Before leaving, the visitor gives Safin a gift and casually drops a bomb, saying she's worried Glenn might be out there cheating. Safin, absolutely not in the mood, kicks the big spider lady out and starts overthinking. Back at the clinic, Glenn finishes treating Kunai, who is now deeply embarrassed. She thanks him and leaves in a hurry. Glenn, meanwhile, returns home, feeds the fairies, and sees Safin. But then he notices something shocking. Her stomach is swollen. Safin, completely unbothered, tells him she's now pregnant. Seeing that she loves no one else, she must have drugged him, loved him, and made him a baby daddy. Just as Glenn's frail little heart is about to explode out of his weak ribcage, he moves closer, only for her to reveal it's just a prank. She has an egg someone found and brought over. Before anyone can process what's happening, the bandits, thinking they're in some Attack on Titan side quest, storm the clinic like brainless titans. Safin, now in full protective waifu mode, wipes the floor with one of them without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, Glenn, the useless sack of bones that he is, realizes this night isn't ending without some over-the-top shonen fight scenes. Safin quickly figures out that the bandits think they're working with Kunai. Speaking of Kunai, she's already taken down one of these bottom-tier villains and explains the situation. Turns out these bandits are involved in a harpy egg and animal trafficking ring. Glenn realizes the egg they have belongs to a harpy, and the bandits want it back. Just when things couldn't get dumber, Lady Scotty shows up in a boat pulled by Lula, who has apparently been downgraded from pop idol to full-time water taxi. Glenn immediately accuses Scotty of exploiting Lula's poverty. Scotty shuts him down instantly, reminding him that he's about as relevant as filler episodes. Lula defends Scotty, saying she's doing this by choice. With everyone gathered, they charge toward the bandit hideout, fully expecting this to turn into a One Piece style arc finale. The patrol team kicks down the front doors like they're storming the Grand Line, ready to rescue the kidnapped Harpy girls. Lady Scotty apologizes for dragging them into this mess, but before the emotional moment can settle, the bandits ambush them with arrows. Fortunately, our heroes dodge like they've been secretly training in the Survey Corps. Kunai tanks a few arrows like they're minor inconveniences. Meanwhile, Tissalia and her team of overpowered centaurs enter the battlefield, trampling bandits like they're bugs. They tell Glenn and his useless self to keep moving toward the hostages. One of the dumbest bandit rants about how humans and monsters can never live together, but Tissalia, not in the mood for his nonsense, knocks some sense into him with a well-placed kick. As their boat arrives at the hideout, Kunai orders Lula to get to safety. Right when things start looking good, the bandit leader appears, looking like a rejected sword art online villain. He and Kunai exchange insults, with him justifying his messed up trafficking business as necessary for survival. Kunai, unimpressed, calls him an ugly bottom-feeding dog and challenges him to a duel. The fight isn't over yet. The bandits try to rally, but Safin, Tissalia, and Scotty form an OP trio and crush them instantly. Unfortunately, Safin gets poisoned and passes out. As she's fading, she starts mumbling some deep confession, only for Glenn to reveal he already knew. This somehow turns into Safin getting weirdly intimate, because apparently it's mating season and she's picked the weakest male in the entire world. She pulls Glenn onto the bed and locks hands with him like she's about to introduce him to a whole new world. Look at those watermelons, round and perfectly placed, ready to suffocate this poor fool. Just when things are about to get spicy, the poison kicks in at the worst possible moment, saving Glenn from losing his virgin status. A few weeks later, Glenn and Safin, the only reason he's still alive, travel with Tessalia and her crew to check on the harpies. Glenn worries about Illy, the harpy girl who gave birth. She can't fly after being kidnapped, and somehow, Glenn thinks he can fix that. Before his pea brain can process anything, a landslide slams into the carriage. One of Tessalia's centaurs, Lorna, takes the hit, proving she's 10 times stronger than the goat in a lab coat. Glenn scrambles to check on Lorna, diagnosing her with a fractured leg. She tells him she's fine, but this soggy loaf of bread insists she needs treatment. The harpies arrive and fly Lorna to a village, where Glenn, in full doctor mode, confirms that her injury is actually just a sprain. Lorna, proving she has more grit in one hoof than Glenn has in his entire noodle body, tries to stand and immediately regrets it. Later, the harpies line up for checkups, all thanking Glenn for saving them. As if he wasn't already feeling like some kind of hero, he asks about Illy. Turns out she wants nothing to do with him. Probably the smartest decision she's ever made. Glenn eventually finds Kay alone by the river, looking lost. She explains she got separated from Tessalia. Glenn, trying to act like some wise old sage, asks about her relationship with Lorna. Kay tells him how they were orphans who grew into strong, battle-hardened warriors. Right when things start getting serious, Tessalia shows up to drag Kay back like a scolding mother. During dinner, Tessalia vents about Kay's clumsiness, which has gotten worse since they arrived. Safin, always enjoying a bit of gossip, asks Tessalia why they're negotiating with the Harpy Elder. Tessalia reveals her family wants to use the Harpies for business, but Kay's blunders are ruining everything. Desperate, she asks Glenn to examine Kay, and even offers him top-tier booze. Of course, Safin agrees before the goat can even process it. As Glenn stresses over how to help, Safin casually slices apples and suggests tying up Lorna to help Kay focus. Glenn, with all the wisdom of a trash-tier harem protagonist, takes the idea literally. He blindfolds and restrains Lorna, and instead of protesting, this half-centaur actually enjoys it. The next day, Kay was finally free from her bandages, and the clown doctor, Tessalia, and Safin set out to check on Illy. Instead of doing something normal like checking her pulse, this fool Glenn tickles her underarm like a creep. Illy's reaction is a mix of, "Get off me," and "Is this how you got your medical degree?" Safin pulls the farm animal back, warning him to stop acting like he's about to plot his patient. Meanwhile, Tessalia is hyping this fool up, telling him to go harder. Illy, however, isn't about to let this goat have his way. She refuses to believe her feathers falling out is normal, and sends a sharp-clawed kick straight at Glenn's dumb face, calling him a quack. Before she can connect, Tessalia steps in and reminds Illy who the real boss is. Illy storms off, flying away dramatically, leaving Tessalia to clean up the mess. Tessalia tracks Illy down and finally gets her to talk. Turns out Illy is Tessalia's biggest fan and dreams of fighting in the arena just like her. Tessalia, feeling flattered, explains that her battles are more about grace and strategy than brute force. To prove a point, she picks up a stick and challenges Illy to a spar. If Illy wants to talk big, she better back it up. Later, Tessalia returns to the treatment room, telling Glenn about her glorious fight for his honor. Safin, never missing a chance to roast someone, agrees and suggests she should have just shoved the stick straight through Illy's beak. Meanwhile, Glenn is worried Illy might get kidnapped again if she keeps running away. Tessalia hands him one of Illy's feathers that fell during their spar, and he notices something weird about it. The next day, they gather feathers of the same color, and Tessalia hopes Illy finds a place where she belongs. Suddenly, Safin slithers in, clearly jealous, carrying a random pile of feathers, like she's about to open a black market pillow shop. She's definitely not thrilled about Glenn spending so much time with Tessalia, who is very ready to prepare him. Just as things are finally calming down, a harpy rushes in with news. Illy is missing. The dumb bird flew off and now can't even fly anymore, stuck in the woods like an idiot. Glenn, the ever-trying cow, decides to search for her instead of letting nature teach her a lesson. Safin, using her snake eyes, spots Illy first. Illy tells them to leave her alone and go love themselves. But Glenn, for once in his life, does something useful and tells her that her feathers are changing, not because she's sick, but because she's growing her adult feathers. And not just any feathers. These are special phoenix-like feathers that will make every other bird jealous. Illy, now hyped, spreads her feathers, excited about the idea of flying again. A few days later, she shows Glenn her new feathers, which look like someone threw random ice cream flavors into a blender. Glenn, the useless goat, asks why she didn't want him to examine her before. Illy, blushing, admits she couldn't look him in the eye after he saw her lay an egg. With that, she flies off, leaving a single feather behind. Glenn catches it, realizing it's strangely hot. maybe a sign of the phoenix spirit burning inside her. Glenn is forced to teach the harpies how to shower because they smell worse than an otaku convention after 3 days with no ventilation. One harpy, acting like she just discovered physical contact, completely malfunctions when the virgin brushes her feathers. That sets off a chain reaction, and now all the harpies are fighting over who gets to feel Glenn's useless touch next. Later, Illy bursts into Glenn's clinic, covered in some mysterious sticky substance. It looks like she flew through the woods and straight into a spider's web. Glenn, using his 2 functioning brain cells, figures out it's from an Arakan, a half-man, half-spider creature. He tells Illy to take a hot bath, but before she can rope him into joining, Safen shuts that nonsense down faster than Lightning McQueen. More harpies show up covered in the same webby mess, and Glenn, the medically trained idiot, finally realizes they need to deal with the source of the problem. He and Safen follow the silk trails into the forest, like 2 clueless kids in a fairy tale, only to walk straight into a trap. Out comes Arania, a spider woman who knows Safen from way back. Turns out, she's here hunting the harpy with phoenix feathers. Glenn introduces her to Illy, but the moment Arania sees those fancy feathers, she loses her mind and starts chasing Illy like a starving man after a buffet. Tisalia, already annoyed from training nearby, watches the whole mess unfold and is seconds away from having a meltdown. She insists that Glenn, who has been largely unhelpful, take action before the Spider-Woman harms Illy in public view. Safen, being the worst possible person to de-escalate a situation, starts quoting Uncle Ben about great power and responsibility, but Tisalia isn't in the mood for life lessons. The 2 start arguing. Glenn tries and fails to play peacemaker, and Safian storms off. That night, Glenn finally does something right and takes Safian to a hot spring to help her relax. The next day, the peaceful village life is interrupted by rumbling noises, and the elder sends his best men to investigate. Meanwhile, Safian is chilling in the bath with the horse girls, leaving Glenn to deal with the chaos alone. Arania, still obsessed with the phoenix feathers, shows up at Glenn's clinic pretending to be sick just to get his attention. She flirts with him, acting like she finally understands why Safen wants to cuddle him so badly. She even asks Glenn to take a walk with her. Like the fool he is, he agrees. Of course, it's a trap. Glenn steps into one of her webs, and Arania, now completely unhinged, reveals her true intentions. She wants to cuddle him right then and there and make her 8 legs shake. Just as she's about to start, Tisalia crashes in like a jealous girlfriend. She and Arania immediately get into a screaming match over who's the superior multi-legged woman deserving of Glenn's useless affection. Arania calls Tisalia a hypocrite, saying she acts all noble while secretly being just as thirsty as everyone else. Tisalia, triggered beyond belief, refuses to be compared to a creepy spider and goes full attack mode. Before things get completely out of control, Safen arrives and saves Glenn from getting turned into spider food. She makes it clear that Glenn doesn't have time for love, though it's obvious her own words sting. Later that night, Glenn and Safen share a drink. Safen, drunk and emotional, finally admits her feelings. She confesses she's scared someone will steal Glenn away, especially with Tisalia being so dead set on marrying him. The village turns into a madhouse as people panic, running around like headless chickens. Tisalia tries to keep them calm while barking orders to prevent a giant-sized disaster. She tells everyone to pack up and move their stuff far from the mountain before the oversized problem arrives. The ones who can fly take off with their belongings, leaving the slowpokes to scramble. Glenn, the useless goat, barely finishes treating his last patient when Safen tells him to stop being dumb and start packing before they get left behind. Glenn, the master of bad timing, stares out the window and sees Arania actually helping, which surprises him because he thought she only lived to make his life worse. Safen tells him Arania is really good at stuff, but before he can process that information, the ground starts shaking. Glenn starts looking for Tisalia, realizing she's been missing for a while. As she walks forward, fantasizing about whatever nonsense is in her head, she suddenly sees Safian and gets distracted by her outfit. Safian casually explains that she asked Arania to make it for her because it's freezing. Tisalia, of course, is too focused on her dramatic hero moment to care. Glenn, the human-shaped burden, suddenly appears out of nowhere. Tisalia is amused but not surprised because of course he would show up uninvited. Safen and Tisalia start arguing over whether they should stay and fight or follow the villagers, both too stubborn to back down. Glenn interrupts their bickering, probably the first useful thing he's done all day, and tells them he has a plan. They all agree to follow it. They move forward and finally see the giant up close. Glenn, proving once again that he has the survival instincts of a potato, walks right up to the massive creature to ask why she came down the mountain. The girls yell at him to stop being a goat, but before he can process the warning, the giant sneezes. The sheer force of it sends a wave of sticky mucus flooding through the village, sweeping Glenn off his hooves and sending him flying like a rejected action figure. It turns out the giant has a cold. Before anyone panics, the giant, whose name is Diome, explains that she came looking for a doctor. Glenn, covered in snot and regretting all his life choices, confirms she has a fever and asks when she started feeling sick. She tells him everything, and he promises to make her some medicine. Like the clown he is, Glenn immediately trips and falls straight onto the giant's, divine melons. He thanks her for saving him, but instead of getting out like a normal person, he starts squeezing, realizing they're just as soft as a human's. After she finally gets her medicine, the other girls start to warm up to Diome. Glenn, shocked that the scary giant is actually nice, starts to wonder if all those terrifying stories were just exaggerated nonsense. She needs a warm cloth to help her recover, and luckily, Safin knows someone who can make it. They run to Arania, who practically jumps for joy, because designing giant-sized clothes has always been her dream. The villagers help out, and by the end of the day, Diome is wrapped up in a cozy new outfit. She thanks them all, and just like that, disaster is avoided. Safin tells Glenn to stop standing around and get back to work because the clinic isn't going to run itself. He follows her, realizing she's right. Later, Glenn takes Tasalia out for dinner, letting her eat as much as she wants after everything she's been through. They chat about recent events, but Safin, who has clearly been spying the entire time, suddenly jumps in with her opinion. She admits she admires Tasalia's courage, but quickly reminds her that she's not about to let her steal Glenn away. Tasalia, not one to back down from a challenge, fires back, and the two start arguing like children. Glenn, being the dumb cow he is, thinks they're getting along. They both immediately tell him he's wrong, but end up laughing anyway. The next day, Glenn gets invited to the Merry Water ceremony. Safin notices an empty seat and realizes one of the guests is missing. Before she can think too much about it, the ceremony begins. Everything seems fine until, out of nowhere, one of the ladies in the ceremony suddenly collapses. Glenn, the walking disaster, starts talking to Safin about what just happened. He acts like he was some kind of hero, even though he probably tripped over his own hooves a few times before getting there. They talk about her personal doctor, and for some reason, Scotty is treated like some kind of legend in the city. Glenn, being the clueless cow he is, just nods along, probably still trying to process basic information. They finally head to see Lady Thule. She looks at Glenn and immediately points out that he has aged terribly. Glenn, in typical fashion, takes this as a friendly conversation instead of an insult to his face. They catch up since it's been a long time, but things take a serious turn when she tells them she's in a critical condition. Despite being on the verge of collapsing, she still refuses to give details about what's wrong. She doesn't know the exact cause, but says that with some medicine and proper food, she can at least walk around without looking like she's about to drop dead. She also mentions that Skay doesn't even want to get better, and then decides that she's talked enough, basically kicking them out. On their way out, they see that the doctor is drowning in work, running from one patient to another like she's the only one keeping the palace from falling apart. Glenn, ever the stubborn goat, refuses to accept that there's nothing they can do. He immediately starts scheming, convinced that he can fix everything, even if it means going against what his teacher told him. He decides to head straight to Skay's room, and this is where Safin starts to panic. Her brain instantly goes into overdrive because Glenn, the useless bull, will be alone in another woman's room. Worse, he has to examine her while she's in less clothing. Safin tries to convince herself that it's just medical examination, and that Glenn has done this a million times before. But she can't shake the feeling that something will go wrong because, well, it's Glenn. He has the ability to turn even the most normal situation into a complete disaster. As they prepare for the evening, she keeps giving him side eyes, knowing full well that he's going to mess up somehow. Later that night, they reach Skay's room. Glenn is the only one allowed to enter, which Safin immediately protests. She insists that she has to go in with him. Despite her protests, Glenn goes in alone, while Safin and Kay stick their ears to the door like a pair of nosy children. Inside, Glenn sees Lady Scotty, and just when he thinks she's too weak to talk, she opens her mouth and starts feeling bad for troubling Kunai. She tells Glenn that he can't cure her, which somehow shocks him. Apparently, the goat still thinks he's a miracle worker. Then she casually opens her chest, revealing a massive tumor on her ridiculous-sized melons. Glenn, instead of acting professionally, asks if he can touch it. Of course, he starts rubbing it like a complete buffoon while she explains how the tumor is spreading through her veins. He continues checking different parts of her body, trying to figure out if he can actually do something or if he's just wasting time. Then he checks her tail and notices it's a different color. As he tells her to calm down, she suddenly starts making noises that make the whole situation 10 times worse. Glenn, the king of bad decisions, doesn't even notice how awkward things have gotten until she falls to her knees, overwhelmed with mixed emotions. Just as things reached peak stupidity, Kunai and Safin burst through the door, fully prepared to end Glenn's miserable existence. Safin is fuming, ready to strangle him for making her jealous yet again. Kunai, who is normally calm, also looks like she wouldn't mind tossing him out the window. But before they can do anything, Scotty stops them and declares that the examination is over. The next day, Glenn goes to see his teacher and tells her his grand plan to save Scotty. She asks if he's convinced her to do the surgery yet, and he confidently says that he will. His teacher, probably wondering how she ever taught someone this dumb, tells him to come back if he manages to convince her. She's clearly proud of them though, since she trained them at the academy, but then she mentions that they'll need more hands for the surgery, and describes someone skilled in threading. This triggers something in Glenn's empty head, and he suddenly remembers someone perfect for the job, Arania. They head off to find her, but of course she refuses at first. Safin bribes her by mentioning that they'll get matching uniforms. Arania, unable to resist, immediately agrees, proving that fashion beats common sense every time. With that settled, they begin planning everything else they need to convince Skay to go through with the surgery. Glenn, the human embodiment of a confused goat, decides to visit Meme, who is battling back pain and stress from her job. Meme starts complaining about her sexy but tired body while multitasking, like a cow trying to balance on two legs. She bumps into someone mid-sentence, dramatically returns to an iron, and bam, rips her pants, exposing her underwear for all to see. Glenn, the professional idiot, gawks at her exposed buttocks like a clueless chicken, earning himself a well-deserved slap. Emotional damage, indeed. His eyes turn black, and he follows Meme to meet her boss like the whipped fool he is. The boss, clearly more competent than Glenn, asks why the goat man is even there. Glenn fumbles, explaining he needs new tools for a surgical procedure involving skating. The boss, unimpressed, says the central hospital will cover the bills and assures Meme she's in charge of creating the needles needed for the surgery. Meme panics, thinking if her needles fail, she'll take the blame for the whole city's misery. Her boss insists she handles it, while Glenn, acting like a supportive but clueless sheep, says he's counting on her. Meanwhile, Glenn checks in on Arania's sewing progress, only to find out Scotty, the patient, refuses the surgery. Instead of solving the issue, Glenn bleats about how it's not surprising, leaving everyone to wonder why Scotty is stubborn about saving her own life, proving he's about as helpful as a broken umbrella. Glenn insists they keep trying. The goat man then inspects the surgical tools with the head doctor. The tools are sharp, and Meme's boss praises her needle designs, though he admits being hard on her. This triggers Glenn's brain, yes, he has one, to reminisce about his academy days when his teacher was equally tough on him. That teacher must have had the patience of a saint to deal with this walking disaster. Back in the workshop, Meme is losing her mind trying to design a needle strong enough to pierce a dragon's arteries. She's overworked, frustrated, and eventually passes out like an exhausted donkey. Glenn, ever the hero, arrives and decides the best solution is to rip her clothes open with scissors. Naturally, this exposes her watermelons. He insists she's rushed to the hospital because she's having a heat stroke, or maybe she just passed out from dealing with Glenn's nonsense. At the hospital, Meme wakes up confused and mortified, realizing she's no longer in the shop. Glenn, the clumsy cow, informs her she needs rest and, of course, mentions that her melons were exposed because it was an emergency. Meme, horrified, gets a top from Arania, while Glenn diagnoses her with motion sickness like the unqualified doctor he isn't. While Meme stares at something suspiciously, Glenn can't resist asking what's distracting her. She narrates everything that happened while she was trying to perfect the needle design. Back at the workshop, Meme demonstrates her new needle, which turns out to be super strong. Glenn, in his infinite goat wisdom, declares he'll consult the head doctor before approving more production. Meme thanks him for allowing her to work, but Glenn, ever the awkward fool, advises her to look up when walking. Meme, embarrassed about her eyebrows, thinks he's flirting. She bolts like a spooked chicken, vowing to take him to court. Glenn goes to see Scotty. The goat-headed genius decides he's going to convince her to agree to the surgery. Meanwhile, Glenn supervises Arania's stitching practice, trying to prep her for the big event. Safin, always the drama queen, notices Glenn getting a bit too cozy with Arania. Clearly, she's not having any of that nonsense. This cow-brained fool scrambles out of there, claiming he'll eat out since he's running late. What a loser. With Glenn gone, the girls break into an argument over him. Safin, in her ever-so-graceful way, tells Arania she's wasting her time. According to Safin, Glenn will always come crawling back to her. Let's be real, though. Glenn is about as dependable as wet tissue paper in the rain. Later, Safin invites Arania and Telia for a girls' night out, where Telia gulps down food like she's in a speed-eating contest. Safin, trying to flex her so-called brilliance, reveals she's got alcohol that can sedate dragons. This is clearly going to end well. They all exchange confused glances, but Safin keeps talking nonsense about her dragon-sedating booze, like it's the miracle of the century. Things get spicier when Safin catches Arania snooping around, trying to steal something special between her and Glenn. Safin, who takes pettiness to a whole new level, corners Arania. Telia shows up for extra intimidation. Arania, now caught like a rat in a trap, tries to escape but ends up apologizing, looking as guilty as a dog caught eating homework. After much drama, they all start chatting about Glenn, their supposed Prince Charming, even though he's really just a clueless donkey. Safin calls him a softie, despite all his pranks and failures. Seriously, Glenn couldn't even win at tic-tac-toe if his life depended on it. The girls accuse Arania of being in love with Glenn. Arania, confused and flustered, denies it, but then goes silent. Maybe the hamster in her head finally stopped running. The next day, Glenn waddles over to Scotty again. She finally spills the beans about why she doesn't want the surgery. She talks about the war, how she ended up in her current form, and why she thinks living a long life is a waste of time. Glenn, in his usual cabbage-brained way, tries to inspire her. He talks about how everyone is working hard for her, even the mermaid who sings and prays every day. Glenn, the self-proclaimed motivational speaker, tells her she can enjoy sweets or try romance like a normal girl. Scotty, surprisingly, agrees to consider it. She then gives in and decides to go through with the surgery, putting her trust in Glenn. Big mistake, Scotty. Big mistake. The next day, the surgery begins. Safin monitors Scotty's vitals while the head doctor takes charge. As they operate, Scotty's body starts heating up like a volcano. The head doctor orders Safin and Arania to step back, saying the heat is too dangerous. Meanwhile, Glenn, the human turnip, is tasked with cutting out the tumor. It's almost laughable that anyone trusts this guy with sharp tools. Outside, the townspeople gather, holding lamps and praying for the surgery's success. If only they knew their lives were in the hands of this walking disaster. Later, the city's in full swing, hosting a ceremony right in the middle of town. Scotty, looking majestic as ever, addresses her people and promises to stay their protector. The crowd loses their minds like they just scored VIP tickets to see Hatsune Miku live. Kunai congratulates Scotty on her recovery, and she, all smiles, feels thankful for Glenn's involvement. But Scotty's got other things brewing. The moment she hears Glenn is back at the clinic, she bolts off with one goal. She's ready to claim Glenn and start the dragon baby-making factory. Meanwhile, Glenn, our certified clueless goat, is at the clinic, tending to Safin. She's acting like a lost puppy, all wide-eyed and awkward. Glenn, oblivious as usual, notices something's off and shoves his fingers into her throat for an examination. Safin's practically glowing red, her face hotter than a Natsu fire attack. Glenn, still as dense as a bag of rocks, fixes her issue, pats her on the head like she's a kid, and waddles off to his next task. Later, Glenn stumbles across Scotty and Kunai, whose carriage decided to yeet itself into chaos. Scotty, thrilled, leaps into Glenn's arms like she's in a romance. She starts begging him to make her completely his. Like she's full-on ready to turn this meeting into a rated R Dragon Ball level situation. Kunai, the real MVP, yanks her off him and tells her to calm down. But Scotty isn't done. Nope. Reluctantly, he helps her, but her mood sinks. It's clear she was hoping for a bit more action from our vegetable-brained hero. Before things get more awkward, Mimi shows up to fix their carriage, saving Glenn from further embarrassment. Scotty, still trying to keep her cool, gifts everyone giant wine barrels, and thanks Mimi. Glenn, checking his non-existent watch, asks Mimi to watch over the barrels while he dashes off for a house call. Meanwhile, Arania swings by the clinic to tease Safin. She hands her an address. taunting her about taking Glenn if Safin doesn't step up her game. Safin, not one to be outdone, shoots back with a declaration that Glenn belongs to her and her alone. In the Harpy village, Dion is showing off her strength, lifting boulders like she's training with Goku on King Kunai's planet. Her, melons are the real stars here though, making even the villagers stop and take notice. They invite her to their feast, and Dion, being the generous queen she is, gives them enough food to last a lifetime. Back in the city, Glenn returns to Mimi and announces reinforcements have arrived to carry the wine barrels. Enter Celia and her crew, who swoop in like the cavalry. They all part ways, with Glenn heading back to the clinic. At the clinic, Safin is in full paranoia mode, imagining every girl in the area plotting to steal Glenn. Orania, ever the troll, reminds Safin that Glenn is like an Excalibur-wielding knight, charming every girl he examines. Suddenly, Ellie bursts in with food from her village, asking where Glenn is. Right on cue, Glenn arrives, and the girls swarm him like fangirls at a boy band concert. Safin, jealous and territorial, keeps the others at bay while Scotty and Kunai show up with even more food. The group throws a massive party, cooking everything they've got. The vibe is electric as they gossip about Glenn's newfound popularity. Talia warns everyone about Scotty being a new rival, but Scotty's too busy cozying up to Glenn to care. She thanks him for changing her mind about the surgery and cuddles up close. Safin, refusing to be outdone, uses her tail to yank Glenn away, holding him like he's her last slice of pizza. If there's one thing clear, it's that nobody wants to cuddle Glenn more than Safin. And honestly, the way things are going, Glenn's about to be the busiest human in the city. Thanks for watching our latest recap. Loved it? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment below. Ring the notification bell so you're always in the loop. Think you can guess the name of the anime we just recapped? Drop your guesses in the comments. Let's see who's got the anime radar. Stay awesome, and we'll catch you in the next video.